Joined here by the FAI's head of fitness, Dan Horan. I was just listening into your chat to the parents and the players as well, the young players as well. Maybe just start off on how you got into this fitness area. It was interesting that you did commerce, was it, in college at first? Which
I did,
yeah.
So I have sort of my own background. I would have been an aspiring footballer myself. I got a scholarship to UCD, did a commerce degree, and played then for Bray Wanderers for a couple of seasons, and went to America on a scholarship and did a master's degree in administration at Boston College, so played over there as well, and then did a master's degree in exercise and health science at the University of Bristol. I've worked in the fitness industry then for a number of years, then went and did an MSc in physiotherapy in Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh, and for the last 12 years then I've sort of worked as a strength and conditioning coach and physiotherapist in private work and also in elite football. So I've worked with international teams since early 2007, and then for the last 6 years worked with the men's national team. And then for the last 3 years worked with all of our international teams, assisting the head coaches with regard to planning their training camps and the fine detail around international football.
Yeah, you kind of showed us more or less what the players have been doing up to now before they come in within the FAI umbrella. What do, like, say, a 13, 14-year-old, because most of them are 14 apart from I think one who's 13, what have they generally done in terms of strength and conditioning or general fitness work up to this point?
Yeah, so I think that's a difficult question to answer specifically. You would need to look at each player on a case-by-case basis. So some players are a little bit more advanced in that area than others. I think the challenge for players is getting access to appropriate professionals who understand paediatric strength and conditioning, which is what it is, and making sure that they're not introduced to an adult strength and conditioning program before they're actually ready for it. So it's really some players will be in that environment at their club level where their clubs have access to that and they've already started that sort of process. Others won't have done any of that yet. So it's really a mixed bag with regard to where they are in that journey.
Yeah, and in terms of interacting with clubs as well, because they'll all have come from different places, different parts of the country, and with different methods. Is there a general thing where you kind of go in and chat to clubs as well, and kind of link up and see what the best practice is across the country, or what way does it work?
So currently we don't have a situation where I am working closely with all of the clubs. That would be a full-time role really, and we don't have that in place at the moment. So this is about educating the clubs when they come in on the coach education pathway with regard to what young players need to be exposed to, where they should start, how many gym sessions per week, the content, the type of content, and then it's educating the clubs with regard to the type of people that should be introduced to these players, the strength and conditioning professionals, and trying to get that type of education across to clubs.
One of the other things, obviously, the nutritionist spoke for a little bit as well, and that's obviously a core factor. Can you just tell us in terms of, say, a 13, 14-year-old, what they need to be doing at this stage?
Yeah, so the principles are not very complicated and they stay the same really as the years go by. So you could see Mark was talking about what's called a food first approach. So making sure that players get the basics right to start with, and trying to be consistent with their eating. So making good choices, appropriate breakfast from the point of view of getting fueled with the right types of energy. So a carbohydrate based breakfast on a match day or a heavy training day, you show that image of porridge with blueberries, so a balanced breakfast there. Looking at protein content in meals as well. So it's trying to get education across to players and parents with regard to what an appropriate breakfast looks like, and giving practical examples as he did, and then what an appropriate lunch and what an appropriate dinner looks like. So really it's about consistency of eating, frequency of eating during the day, making sure players are fueled properly to play in games and to train. So one of the challenges for players, depending on where they live, is they may be commuting a certain distance to training sessions, and when they finish a training session, then that's when they need to start refueling. And if they don't have a practical strategy in place, maybe a Tupperware box with a meal there for them to eat on the journey home, then the time frame post-training to eating can be too long. So it's trying to, give them practical solutions to what the problems they typically face.
One of the other, I think, interesting points was the issue of workload, and also communication, which kind of both kind of dovetail, because it's up to, as you were pointing out, the player to communicate with parents or coaches about any little niggles they may have, whether it's a knock or whatever it is. And in terms of that communication side, maybe I think the assumption would be, you know, players want to play, so there's probably a temptation to kind of go, do you know what, it's not much of a knock. Obviously you want to kind of make sure that everything, that, you know, that there is open communication, because any niggle could actually be something slightly more serious, I guess.
Yeah, and again, we don't want to create a situation where players are, you know, maybe hypersensitive or hyper vigilant, where every tiny, you know, sensation that they experience, that they're flagging it. I think these players will understand that there will be bumps and bruises along the way, and it's a normal part of the game. So really what we're trying to do is educate them about the types of presentations that need to be flagged. So in this age group, groin pain can start to develop if they're training heavily and maybe they don't have enough recovery between sessions. They can get heel pain or they can get knee pain. They'd be typical areas where gradual onset of symptoms can be a flag for players that maybe something isn't quite right. So it's more educating players, coaches and parents about the types of problems for this particular age group. And there are areas of the body that young players will often experience problems with as they grow. So, you know, it's not unusual for players to get discomfort around their knees, which is a part of the growth process. But then it's listening to that and maybe managing their training around that to allow them to continue.
Yeah, the issue of workload as well, I think it came up when you were comparing, say, a kind of sample Premier League club, what they do at a similar age, and we clearly do less, I think, from what I could gauge from that. Are the Premier League clubs doing too much, or where's the happy balance there?
Yeah, and again, that's a good question. I don't think anyone has an answer for that, a perfect answer for that. So really, you could see that there was some variation between the Premier League clubs as well. So if there was a perfect fit week that we knew worked, then everyone would be following the same practice. But what I think we know is that players need to build up the capacity to train hard and to train frequently. But that building up process takes time. And at the moment, we need to start to introduce more training per week, so increase the frequency of sessions and work on building the intensity within those sessions, but being respectful that young players' bodies adapt over time and they can't suddenly be exposed to a massive change in their workload. So to answer your question, what's the perfect week? There is no perfect week, but what we know is players need to be training more frequently than 2 nights a week, and really what we're suggesting now is, can we get them to 4 football training sessions per week and have some strength and conditioning work around those sessions as well, and then a match at the weekend and preparing for that game at the weekend.
And especially like things like, say, doing that little bit of extra gym work, that comes down to facilities as well, because it is going to differ around the country. And
that's why we don't try to copy and paste what happens in full-time professional academy environments, and you've got to be respectful of where people are, what facilities they have available to them, and then how do we solve that problem? If a club doesn't have a strength and conditioning facility beside the training ground, then can that elite player, or even, I don't want to use the word elite because these are developing players, can these developing players get access to a gym close to their school or close to their home? And then can they maybe get that 30 minutes of strength work done at a different time of the day, and then when they turn up to training they focus on their pitch session?
Yeah, it was interesting. You also spoke about the education side as well, because that's the other type of growth. There is the physical growth, obviously, but the education side as well, in terms of even the problem solving that we saw on the tactics board. I'd say there's a relation there, maybe not a direct one, but in some way within the way the brain works, the two things come together in some way.
Yeah, so cognitive development for our players is essential. We know that the players need to keep on developing as people, and being overly focused on one aspect of their lives is not healthy. So, and the game is a decision-making game. A lot of the differences at the highest level of the game are players recognizing what to do at the right time and then being able to execute on that. So, in a team game, the cohesion between the players is important. So working together off the pitch to solve tactical problems and then being able to implement that on the pitch is important. But the academic development of our players, we know, is essential, and that's a message I wanted to get across today to both the players, the parents and the coaches.
Yeah, I suppose the final point actually, because the under-15s that have just come in will be playing the under-16s to prepare for the Poland game, and the under-16s team will be kind of set up in a way that the Poles will. Physically, in terms of maybe a comparison between 15 and 16 within the FAI auspices, what would they have done so in that kind of year in between, and physically how far ahead would they be, having been under this umbrella?
So This is where the relationship with the clubs is really important, because the players come in here intermittently. So we aren't going to be doing any physical development work when they come in here. The bulk of their work is done at club level. So what we get when they come in here is where the players are at based on what type of strength work or pitch-based work they have been doing. So really we monitor their progression, but we don't impose any specific strength programs on the players, because we need to have relationships with the clubs and collaborate with the clubs on that. So it's the clubs who really are driving that process when the players aren't in international football. But our job is to create an environment where clubs, players, parents all understand what's required in international football, and then how these players get there is more the responsibility of clubs at this level.
Well, thanks a million for your time. It's all very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.